Korean Mafia boss emptied the wine glass on the black waitress to humiliate her, but her reaction left him frozen. The glass tips without warning. Red wine arcs through the air and breaks against Hana Lee's chest, warm through the thin black fabric before it sinks into the white apron tied at her waist. Drops scatter across the polished floor. A few reach the hem of the chair beside her. For a fraction of a second, nothing moves. Then the room stiffens. Blasian's private dining salon, linen tables, low amber light, walls washed in gold, locks into stillness. A fork pauses halfway to a mouth. Someone near the window draws in a sharp breath and doesn't let it out. The murmur that usually fills the space on East 58th Street drains away, leaving the soft hum of hidden speakers and the faint clink of ice settling in glasses. Choi Min-jae holds the empty stem between his fingers. He doesn't stand. He doesn't look around. His wrist remains lifted, steady, as if the spill were an accident that needs no acknowledgement. Hana's shoes remain planted where they were. Her hands rest at her sides, fingers curled lightly into the seams of her jacket. Wine threads downward, darkening the fabric in slow lines. The scent, oak, alcohol, something sweet, rises between them. Choi finally looks up at her. His gaze travels from the stain on her chest to her face, then lingers there, unhurried. A faint crease appears at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. The men seated with him shift in their chairs, watching closely. No one speaks. "Clean it," he says. The words land softly. They don't echo. They don't need to. Hana inclines her head once. The motion is small, precise. She steps back, careful not to brush against the table. The wine continues to drip from her sleeve, tapping onto the floor in a steady rhythm. Behind her, the dining room exhales, but only partway. Chairs scrape as someone turns slightly away. A server near the wall lowers his eyes and pretends to study a tray. At the edge of the room, the manager's shoulders rise and hold, his mouth opening as if to speak, then closing again. Choi watches all of it. His attention flicks from Hana to the others and back, measuring. Satisfied, he sets the empty glass down with a controlled click. Hana crosses the room toward the service station. Each step leaves a faint mark on the polished wood. No one moves to block her path. No one follows. At the counter, she reaches for a cloth. Her reflection stares back from the steel surface, dark fabric soaked, apron ruined, expression unchanged. She folds the cloth once, twice, aligning the edges. Her breathing stays even. A whisper cuts through the silence behind her. "Hana." She lifts one finger without turning. The whisper dies. When she returns to the table, she lowers herself just enough to reach the spill near Choi's place setting. The cloth absorbs the wine quickly, blooming darker in her hand. She works methodically, avoiding his shoes, the leg of his chair. The men around him watch her movements as if waiting for a mistake. Choi leans back, folding his arms. His chair creaks softly. "You're careful," he says. Hana doesn't answer. The cloth moves across the floor. The stain fades. The wine on her jacket does not. Choi's gaze sharpens. He studies her face again, longer this time, as if searching for something misplaced. His eyes narrow slightly. "Who hired you?" he asks, turning his head toward the manager without breaking eye contact with her. The manager takes a step forward and stops. His hands hover uselessly at his sides. Around them, Blasian's guests sit frozen in their seats, suddenly very interested in their plates, the walls, anything but the space between Hana and Choi. Hana straightens. She rises slowly, the cloth still damp in her hand. Wine slips from her sleeve and falls, dotting the floor anew. She feels the weight of the room settle onto her shoulders, the staff waiting, the guests holding their breath, Choi's attention tightening like a line drawn too far. She knows what one word would do. She knows what silence already has. Choi tilts his head, waiting. Hana meets his eyes. And lets the moment stretch. Choi Min-jae does not look away. The pause stretches, thin as wire. Hana Lee remains standing, her eyes level with his, the damp cloth hanging from her fingers. Around them, Blasian holds its breath. The speakers hum. Somewhere near the kitchen, a dish settles against porcelain with a muted tap that sounds louder than it should. Choi's gaze flicks past her, slow, deliberate, taking in the room. The manager stands rigid a few steps back, hands clasped too tightly. A server near the wall shifts his weight and stops, as if movement itself might draw attention. No one steps closer to Hana. No one steps between them. Choi's mouth curves, almost imperceptibly. He turns his head toward his companions, murmurs something too low to carry. A few chairs scrape as they lean in, curious now, alert. Whatever game he thought he was playing has changed shape. Hana feels it in the room before she sees it, the way eyes begin to slide away from her, not out of kindness but calculation. She lowers her gaze and returns to the service station, the cloth folded again in her hands. The wine on her jacket has cooled, the fabric stiff where it clings to her skin. Behind the counter, the manager finally approaches. He stops short, leaving a careful distance between them. His lips move, then still. When he speaks, his voice barely clears his throat. Are you all right? Hana nods once. He watches her for another second, as if waiting for more, then glances toward the dining room. Choi's table remains the center of gravity. The manager's shoulders sag slightly. He doesn't offer to send her home. He doesn't offer a replacement uniform. He steps back, already retreating. The message lands cleanly. Hana rinses the cloth under cold water. The stain bleeds into the sink, red thinning to pink, then disappearing. She wrings it out slowly. Her hands are steady. When she looks up, she catches her reflection again, dark fabric marked, apron ruined, posture unchanged. A junior server edges closer, stops, pretends to check the inventory list. His eyes flick to her sleeve and away. The hostess avoids the corridor entirely, choosing a longer path that keeps her clear. Isolation spreads quietly, like a draft through an open door. Back in the dining room, Choi reclines, one arm draped over the chair beside him. He accepts a fresh glass from another server, inspects the pour, nods once. His attention drifts, then returns to Hana as she crosses the room to deliver an order at a nearby table. This time, he watches openly. Hana feels his gaze settle on her back, the weight of it pressing between her shoulders. She does not hurry. She does not slow. The room seems to tilt toward him, every movement recalibrating around where he sits. When she passes his table, Choi speaks again, voice mild. You've worked here long? Hana stops. She turns just enough to face him, her hands folded neatly at her waist. She inclines her head. Yes. The answer is spare. It gives him nothing. Choi studies her as if measuring the edges of a box he intends to open. His eyes narrow, then soften. Interesting, he says. He lifts his glass and takes a slow sip. The men beside him exchange looks. One of them smiles. At the host's stand, a phone vibrates against polished wood. The manager glances down, reads the screen, then looks up sharply at Choi's table. His jaw tightens. He pockets the phone without responding. Hana catches the movement from the corner of her eye. The room has shifted again, not louder, not more chaotic, but tighter. Conversations resume in cautious fragments. Chairs scrape. Cutlery moves. Yet every sound seems to travel back to Choi, to the space where he sits, curious now, engaged. Hana returns to the service corridor. She stands there for a beat, alone, the hum of the restaurant pressing in. The wine stain on her jacket has dried, dark and unmistakable. Out in the dining room, Choi sets his glass down and leans toward the manager. His voice doesn't carry far. But Hana sees the question land. The manager leans closer to Choi Min-jae, his posture bent in a way that shortens him. Hana Lee watches from the service corridor as their heads draw together. Choi doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. The men at the table angle their bodies subtly, closing ranks. The manager nods once, too fast, then again, slower, as if correcting himself. When he steps away, his face has lost its color. He doesn't come toward Hana. He moves past her, brushing the edge of the corridor without meeting her eyes. His hand lifts, hesitates, then drops back to his side. The gesture never completes. The dining room resumes its low murmur, but something underneath has shifted. The sound carries a brittle edge now, as if one wrong note might shatter it. A guest laughs too loudly. Another coughs into a napkin and keeps coughing. Choi reclines again, satisfied. He accepts another drink. His attention drifts, then returns to Hana with renewed focus, the way a hand returns to a loose thread. A server approaches Hana with a tray and stops short. He adjusts his grip, knuckles whitening, then murmurs that he'll handle the next section. He waits for her to object. She doesn't. The tray turns away from her, toward someone safer. Hana stands alone in the corridor, the hum of refrigeration pressing against her ears. The smell of wine still clings to her jacket, sweet and sour at once. She smooths the apron at her waist, fingers lingering where the fabric has stiffened. At the host's stand, the phone vibrates again. The manager reaches it this time. He reads, freezes, then looks up toward Choi's table as if pulled by a string. He types a response with his back turned, shoulders hunched, then pockets the phone and exhales through his nose. Choi doesn't look at him. He already knows. A man at Choi's table stands and crosses the room, phone pressed to his ear. He speaks quietly near the entrance, gaze fixed on the dark glass of the front door. The reflection there shows Hana's silhouette in the corridor, motionless. The restaurant feels smaller. The walls closer. Even the chandeliers seem to hang lower, their light pooling in tight circles instead of spreading. Hana steps out to clear a nearby table. The guest avoids her eyes, slides his chair back to give her room, then pulls it in again too quickly. His partner whispers something sharp under her breath. As Hana gathers plates, she senses Choi behind her without turning. The air shifts when he stands. Chairs scrape. The men around him fall silent. He moves closer, not enough to touch, close enough to crowd. Blasian, he says, as if tasting the word. You keep it discreet. Hana straightens. She doesn't answer. Choi smiles faintly. Discretion leaves traces. He steps past her, unhurried, and returns to his seat. The manager appears at Hana's side at once. His voice is low, tight. Can you? He stops. Swallows. Can you wait in the back for a moment? Hana looks at him. His eyes flick toward the dining room, then back. He nods, almost pleading. She turns and walks down the narrow hall toward the office. Each step feels measured, counted. The door closes behind her with a soft click that sounds final. Inside, the room smells of paper and old coffee. A desk lamp hums. The silence presses in. Her phone vibrates in her pocket. She takes it out and reads the single line on the screen. Choi Min-jae has requested ownership records. The phone stays lit in Hana Lee's hand. The single line on the screen doesn't move. It doesn't fade. The office feels smaller with it there, the air stale, the low hum of the desk lamp pressing against her ears. She lowers the phone to the desk without locking it, as if touching the screen again might make the words real in a way they aren't already. Her jacket hangs heavy on her shoulders. The wine has dried into the fabric, stiff and tacky where it pulled tight across her chest. She pinches the collar between her fingers and exhales slowly through her nose. The smell rises again, sweet, sour, unmistakable. The office floor creaks when she shifts her weight. It's an old sound. Worn boards. She's learned which ones complain and which stay quiet. She steps carefully, muscle memory guiding her feet, the same way it always does. Beyond the thin wall, Blasian continues without her. Plates slide. Chairs move. Voices lift and fall. The rhythm carries through the space, steady and indifferent. It does not pause to check on her. Hana reaches for the apron at her waist and unties it. The knot resists for a moment before giving way. She folds the fabric once, then again, smoothing it flat with the edge of her hand. A dark stain mars the center. Her fingers hesitate there, pressing down as if testing whether it might still be warm. She closes her eyes. The uniform feels different against her skin now, too tight, too visible. The weight of it pulls at her shoulders. She remembers other rooms with different floors, different lighting, spaces where standing still meant something else entirely. Places where silence was not safety but instruction. Her eyes open. The office is unchanged. The desk. The lamp. The framed menu on the wall, its glass catching a dull reflection of her face. She barely recognizes it, drawn tight, composed, marked by something she cannot wipe away. A muffled laugh filters through the wall, sharp and brief. It cuts off abruptly, replaced by the scrape of a chair. She imagines Choi Min-jae leaning back, fingers steepled, waiting. Imagines the way he looks at things he intends to keep. Hana's jaw tightens. She presses her tongue against the inside of her cheek until the sensation grounds her. The door handle turns slightly from the outside, then stops. Someone stands there, undecided. A breath passes under the frame. After a moment, footsteps retreat. She remains where she is. Her phone vibrates once against the desk. Not a call. Another message. She doesn't look at it. The vibration alone is enough to tighten the space around her ribs. The floorboard near the desk creaks again as she steps back. The sound carries her somewhere else for half a second, another narrow room, another closed door, another decision made without witnesses. She opens her eyes wider, anchoring herself to the present, to East 58th Street, to the thin walls and the hum and the waiting. Outside, a car horn blares, then fades. Inside, the silence stretches, deliberate and heavy. Hana reaches for her jacket and shrugs it off. The fabric slides down her arms reluctantly, catching at the elbows. She drapes it over the back of the chair, the stain facing outward, impossible to ignore. She looks at it for a long moment. Then she reaches for her phone. Hana Lee unlocks the phone. The glow fills the office, stark against the dim lamp. A second message waits beneath the first. She scrolls with her thumb, slow, deliberate. Names appear, not people, but entities. Filing references. Dates. Jurisdictions. The language is dry, procedural. It still tightens her chest. She sets the phone down and leans her palms on the desk. The wood is cool, scarred by years of use. Her jacket hangs on the chair behind her, the wine stain facing the door like an accusation. She opens the lower drawer and pulls out a thin folder. No label. The edges are soft from handling. Inside, papers are arranged with care, copies, not originals. Trust agreements registered in Queens. Addresses that point to offices with no signage. A signature that never appears twice the same way. She flips one page, then another. A receipt slips loose and lands on the desk. She presses it flat with 2 fingers. The ink is faded. A freight terminal outside Busan. A date from years ago. The memory comes with the smell of diesel and salt, the sound of cranes groaning against the wind. She remembers standing in a coat too light for the cold, watching containers move from ship to shore without anyone looking twice. She closes her eyes briefly, then opens them again. The office door vibrates faintly as someone passes in the hall. Voices murmur. A laugh rises and cuts off. Blasian continues to breathe around her, unaware of how fragile its lungs have become. Hana straightens the papers and slides them back into the folder. She doesn't put it away yet. Her fingers linger on the corner, tracing the crease she's smoothed down more times than she can count. Working the floor had been simple, at first. A uniform. A schedule. A role that shrank her presence to something manageable. Customers didn't ask questions of servers. Inspectors overlooked them. Investors never noticed them at all. Control lived in the quiet spaces. She had chosen queens for the trusts because no one she knew ever looked there first. She had kept Busan distant, folded into logistics and intermediaries and names that meant nothing on their own. Every layer added distance. Every distance bought time. Time is thinning now. Her phone vibrates again, this time longer. She lets it stop on its own. The silence that follows feels heavier for having been interrupted. She imagines Choi Min-jae sitting back in his chair, watching screens fill with data, watching people move when he asks them to. He doesn't need the truth yet. Curiosity alone is enough to start the machinery. Hana reaches for the lamp and switches it off. The office dims. The folder remains a pale rectangle against the desk. She stands there in the half-light, listening to her own breathing, to the muted rhythm of the restaurant beyond the walls. Each sound feels like a thread tugging at the structure she built. The decision to stay unseen had cost her slowly. A name rarely spoken. A face no one associated with authority. Years of correcting people without letting them know they were wrong. The compression had been deliberate. Efficient. It had also been thorough. A knock touches the door, light, uncertain. The handle doesn't turn. Whoever stands there waits, then steps away. The space closes in again. Hana slips the folder into her bag and pulls the strap over her shoulder. The weight settles against her side, familiar and unwelcome. She picks up the phone and unlocks it once more. A new message appears beneath the others. Shorter this time. Ownership trail incomplete. Expanding search. Her jaw tightens. She imagines what expansion looks like: more calls, more records, more attention. People who had never noticed Blasian before would start to look. People who shouldn't. She turns toward the door and pauses. Her hand rests on the knob. The metal is warm from the hull. Revealing herself would end the search. It would also collapse every buffer she put in place, the trusts, the distance, the quiet protection that kept staff insulated from men like Choi. She stands there, the choice narrowing, the air thick. Her phone vibrates once more in her palm. Hana Lee opens the office door and steps back into the corridor. The sound of Blasian rushes toward her, plates clinking, a burst of laughter that stops too quickly, the steady murmur that pretends nothing is wrong. A hostess meets her eyes and then looks past her shoulder, as if expecting someone else to follow. No one does. The manager appears at her side without speaking. He gestures toward the service station, a small motion meant to feel routine. His mouth tightens when she doesn't move right away. The corridor feels narrower with him standing there, his sleeve brushing hers. "We're short," he says. The words come out flat. "Can you cover the west section?" Hana looks at the floor between them. A faint discoloration remains where the wine fell earlier, dulled by cleaning but still visible if you know where to look. She nods. The west section keeps her moving. A table needs water. Another signals for the check. A guest murmurs an apology when she reaches for a plate, as if proximity itself requires one. Others avoid her gaze entirely. Each interaction takes a fraction longer than it should. At the pass, a cook slides a dish toward her and hesitates. He adjusts the garnish, though it doesn't need it, then pushes the plate forward again. "Careful," he says, not meeting her eyes. Hana carries the dish out. Her jacket is gone now, folded in her bag, but the outline of the stain remains on her apron, faint and uneven. It draws glances she feels on her back. Near the bar, two servers whisper. The words blur together, but she catches her name. One of them notices her and falls silent. The other smiles too quickly and asks if she needs help. I've got it, Hana says. They exchange a look that doesn't include her. The manager hovers closer as the night wears on. He checks his phone often, turning his body away each time. When he speaks to her again, his voice is lower. Table 12 asked for you earlier, he says. I told them you were busy. Hana pauses, tray balanced in one hand. She looks toward the private salon. Choi Min-jae's table sits empty now, the chairs pushed in neatly, the glasses cleared. The space feels louder for his absence. That was fine, the manager adds quickly. You did the right thing. She waits. He doesn't say what the wrong thing would have been. A server drops a fork behind her. The clang against the floor cuts through the room. Several heads turn. Choi is not there to notice, but the reaction lingers anyway. Hana bends to pick it up. When she straightens, the weight of the room presses in again, familiar and heavier than before. At the end of the bar, the bartender slides a glass into place and leans closer. He asked about you, he murmurs without looking up. Not by name. Just, you. Hana sets her tray down. The glass trembles slightly as it meets the wood. He asked when he could come back, the bartender continues. Said he prefers consistency. The manager hears this. His shoulders sag, just enough to be seen. He steps in, forcing a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. We can manage, he says, too quickly. We always do. Hana watches him smooth the front of his jacket, straighten a stack of menus that don't need it. She sees the calculation flicker across his face, the staff, the leases, the permits that come up for renewal every year. None of it belongs to her in this moment. All of it would feel the impact of a wrong move. A guest at table 9 raises a hand. Hana turns to go, then stops as the manager's hand closes around her wrist. Not tight. Not quite gentle. Please, he says under his breath. Just, keep doing what you're doing. He lets go immediately, as if surprised by his own touch. Hana steps away. Her pulse beats in her ears, steady and loud. She serves table 9. She clears table 10. The room continues to function, each piece sliding into place with practiced ease. At the host's stand, the phone rings. The hostess answers, listens, then covers the receiver and looks at the manager. He crosses the room and takes the call himself, turning his back to everyone. Hana watches his shoulders stiffen. He ends the call and pockets the phone. When he turns, his face has settled into something careful. He'll be back tomorrow, he says quietly. Same table. He glances at Hana, then away. He asked that you be on. He asked that you be on. The words stay in the air after the manager says them. He doesn't soften them. He doesn't look at Hana Lee when they land. His eyes slide past her toward the dining room, already measuring tomorrow's tables, tomorrow's risks. Hana nods once. The motion feels smaller than it should. Service continues. Blasian settles into its late rhythm, the clink of glasses, the low scrape of chairs, the steady movement of bodies trained to avoid attention. Hana moves with them, her steps precise, her hands steady. Each task completes cleanly. Each one ends too quickly. At the bar, the register drawer opens and closes. The sound cuts through the room. The bartender pauses with the receipt still in his hand, reading longer than necessary. He folds it, unfolds it, then tucks it beneath the counter. When he looks up, his eyes flick toward Hana and away again. The manager's phone vibrates. He checks it, then checks the time on the wall. He types a response with his thumb, stops, deletes it, types again. The screen lights his face from below, sharpening the lines around his mouth. Hana passes the host's stand and catches a glimpse of the screen before he pockets it. Subject lines. Dates. A municipal header she recognizes from other paperwork, other nights spent reading fine print until the words blur. A countdown begins to take shape, not loud, not dramatic. It arrives as columns and deadlines and boxes that must be checked in a specific order. It arrives with penalties attached. In the kitchen corridor, a cook corners the manager, voice low. Hana hears fragments as she passes, inspection window, renewal, hold off until. The manager raises a hand. The cook stops talking. Hana keeps walking. Her phone vibrates in her pocket. She doesn't stop to read it. She waits until she reaches the storage room, the door closing softly behind her. The shelves press in on either side, stacked with linens and supplies. The air smells of detergent and metal. She checks the screen. A reminder sits at the top, flagged. Lease review. Another beneath it. Liquor license update. A third, newer than the others. Compliance verification, requested. She scrolls. The dates cluster tighter than they should. Hana exhales slowly. The shelves don't move. The room stays narrow. The weight gathers anyway. She tucks the phone away and returns to the floor. A guest asks for the check. Another asks for a recommendation. Hana answers both without hesitation. The room watches her now in a different way, not openly, not with sympathy. With expectation. At the end of the bar, the bartender leans in again. Tomorrow, he says, barely audible. They moved things around for him. Hana sets a glass down. The base taps the wood once, too sharp. She adjusts it until it sits perfectly still. Across the room, the manager flips the reservation book open and closed. He runs a finger down the list, stops, flips back, stops again. He presses his lips together and looks up. Hana, he says. She meets him halfway. The distance feels longer than it should. They're asking for documents, he continues. Routine. But, he stops. Swallows. Some of them aren't due yet. She waits. They'll be by in the morning, he adds. Before service. The dining room hums around them. A laugh rises and falls. Silverware clinks. No one notices the way the space tightens. Hana nods again. The motion costs more this time. A server brushes past her shoulder and murmurs an apology that sounds practiced. Another takes over a table without asking. A third avoids her section entirely. The redistribution happens quietly, efficiently. Protection disguised as distance. At the host's stand, the phone rings again. The hostess answers, listens, then hands it to the manager without a word. He turns his back. His shoulders stiffen. He listens longer than he speaks. When he hangs up, he doesn't look at Hana right away. He closes the reservation book and sets it down with care. He confirmed, he says. Same table. He wants the private salon. He hesitates, then adds, he asked for the owner. The word lands heavier than the others. Hana feels it then, not as a spike, but as a narrowing. The options that had felt adjacent now stack on top of each other, compressing the space between them. Silence had worked when curiosity stayed idle. Silence had worked when systems moved slowly. They are not moving slowly anymore. She looks around Blasian, the staff in motion, the guests settling in, the walls holding decades of quiet deals and careful distances. She sees how easily attention could tear through it all. Her phone vibrates again in her pocket. She doesn't reach for it. Hana turns back to the dining room, already knowing what tomorrow demands. Silence will not hold. Silence will not hold. Hana Lee steps into the private salon with that knowledge already settled in her body. The room looks unchanged, linen pressed smooth, glasses aligned, chairs angled just so, but it carries a different weight now. The air feels staged, expectant. Every surface reflects light back toward the center of the table where Choi Min-jae prefers to sit. The manager follows her in and stops short of the threshold. He straightens the cuffs of his jacket, then stills his hands when he notices they're shaking. Two servers hover near the door, waiting for instruction that doesn't come. Choi arrives without hurry. He crosses the room as if it belongs to him, his shoes silent against the floor. The men with him fan out automatically, claiming space without speaking. When he reaches the table, he doesn't sit right away. He looks around first, at the walls, the art, the corners that usually fade into the background. His eyes settle on Hana. "You're here," he says. She inclines her head. The gesture is familiar. It no longer feels protective. Choi takes his seat. He places his phone on the table, screen down, then folds his hands around it. "I appreciate consistency," he continues. "It tells me who understands how things work." The manager shifts his weight. A server clears a glass that doesn't need clearing. The room tightens around the table, the way it does when everyone senses a collision approaching but no one knows where it will land. Choi lifts his gaze again. "I asked a simple question," he says. "It's taking longer than it should." He taps the phone once. The sound is soft. It carries anyway. Hana feels the narrowing then, not of space, but of time. The layers she built to absorb pressure have begun to crack. She can hear it in the room, the subtle change in breathing, the way people angle themselves toward exits without meaning to. She steps forward. The manager turns toward her, eyes widening a fraction. His mouth opens. No sound comes out. Choi watches her approach with open curiosity. "You?" he asks, not unkindly. "Is that what this is now?" Hana stops at the edge of the table. She rests her hands on the back of an empty chair. The wood is smooth, worn by years of use. She lets the contact anchor her. "Yes," she says. The word lands cleanly. It doesn't ask for permission. A pause follows. The kind that stretches long enough for everyone to register that something has shifted. One of Choi's men glances at him, then back at Hana, reassessing. Choi's brows lift slightly. "Yes," he repeats. "To what?" Hana looks past him, taking in the room, her staff gathered too close to the door, the manager standing rigid at the threshold, the familiar faces that have learned to stay small because it keeps them safe. She straightens. "To your question," she says. Choi studies her for a long moment. His gaze sharpens, not with anger, but with interest. "Then answer it." Hana reaches into her bag and places a slim folder on the table. The sound it makes against the linen is barely audible. She slides it forward, stopping just short of his hands. The room seems to tilt toward it. Choi doesn't touch the folder right away. He looks at her instead. "You've been very careful," he says. "That usually means there's something worth protecting." Hana doesn't respond. He opens the folder. Pages shift. His eyes move quickly, taking in names that don't resolve into people, addresses that don't point anywhere obvious, signatures that refuse to settle into a pattern. His jaw tightens. He flips another page. Then another. Around them, the room has gone still. Even the hum of the lights seems to recede. Choi closes the folder slowly. He leans back in his chair, fingers steepled, and looks at Hana again. This time, the calculation is naked. "You chose an interesting way to run things," he says. Hana feels the weight lift from one place and settle in another. The relief is immediate and fleeting. It clears space for something colder. Yes, she says again. The manager takes an involuntary step forward. Hana. She doesn't turn. Choi smiles then, a thin line that doesn't reach his eyes. You could have said nothing, he notes. You didn't. Hana meets his gaze. The silence that follows isn't empty. It's crowded with consequences. Choi's phone vibrates under his hand. He ignores it. He looks around the room one last time, as if committing it to memory, then back at her. This changes things, he says. Hana nods. The motion feels heavier than any she's made tonight. Behind her, someone inhales sharply. Another person whispers her name without meaning to. The truth has entered the room. And it does not leave quietly. The room stays quiet after Choi Min-jae speaks. Not stunned, measuring. Hana Lee feels it in the way bodies hold themselves. The manager doesn't rush forward. The servers don't retreat. No one reaches for a phone or a tray. The silence is no longer fear-driven. It's evaluative. Choi rises from his chair. The sound of it, the soft drag of wood against floor, breaks the spell. He closes the folder and leaves it on the table, not pushed back toward her, not taken with him. His fingers linger on the edge of the linen as if deciding whether to straighten it. He doesn't. You've complicated my evening, he says lightly. Hana doesn't move. He steps past her without contact. The men with him follow, their formation looser now, glances flicking toward Hana with open curiosity instead of dismissal. At the doorway, Choi pauses and looks back once more. This place has been invisible for a long time, he adds. It won't be anymore. Then he leaves. The door closes. The latch clicks. Blasian exhales. The sound rolls through the room in pieces, chairs shifting, a breath released too loudly, someone clearing their throat. A server laughs once, abruptly, and clamps a hand over their mouth as if startled by the noise. Hana remains where she is. The manager steps forward, then stops. His face has changed. The tight calculation is gone, replaced by something unsteady. He looks at the folder on the table, then at her, then away again. We'll need to, he breaks off. Swallows. We'll need to adjust some things. She nods. Word spreads without being spoken. Staff straighten when they pass her. Some avoid her eyes. Others look directly at her now, curiosity unmasked. A junior server hesitates, then murmurs her name like a question. Hana turns toward the service corridor. The walls feel farther apart than they did before. The space carries sound differently. She hears more. At the host's stand, the reservation book lies open. Several entries have been crossed out. New names are penciled in with firmer strokes. A note has been added in the margin, private, high priority. The bartender pours water he doesn't need to pour and sets it down untouched. His eyes track the door Choi exited through, then return to Hana. He doesn't smile. In the office, the phone begins to vibrate again. Hana closes the door behind her and leans back against it. The hum of the restaurant presses through the wood, familiar and altered. She unlocks the phone. Messages stack quickly now. Numbers she doesn't recognize. Subject lines that suggest urgency without explanation. One email header catches her eye, a firm she hasn't dealt with in years, asking for confirmation. She scrolls once, then stops. The relief that had flickered when Choi left drains away, replaced by a colder awareness. The attention hasn't disappeared. It has multiplied. Different angles. Different interests. Some curious. Some patient. She pockets the phone and returns to the floor. The dining room has shifted. Guests speak more freely, as if the danger has passed. A couple near the window laughs. Someone orders another bottle. Life resumes with a dangerous confidence. The manager intercepts her near the bar. "They'll be here in the morning," he says quietly. "Not inspectors. Consultants." Hana meets his eyes. "They want a walkthrough," he adds. "Full access." She nods once. A server drops a napkin at her feet. When Hana bends to pick it up, the server reaches down too, their hands nearly touching. The server pulls back first. Outside, a car door slams. Footsteps pass the windows. A shadow lingers, then moves on. Hana looks around Blasian, the tables reset, the staff moving with practiced ease, the walls that have held secrets by staying quiet. The balance that protected them is gone. In its place sits visibility, sharp and indiscriminate. Her phone vibrates again. She checks it this time. A new message appears beneath the others. Unrelated inquiry. Discreet. Interested parties. Hana locks the screen. The humiliation is over. What comes next has teeth. The dining room does not rush back to her. Blasian breathes in fragments now, measured, careful. Chairs slide without scraping. Glasses meet tables softly. Voices stay low even when laughter returns. Hana Lee stands near the edge of the floor and feels the difference in how the space holds her. Not hostile. Not warm. Attentive. The folder is gone from the table. The linen has been changed. The place where Choi Min-jae sat looks ordinary again. That ordinariness feels earned and fragile at the same time. Hana moves through the room without the jacket. The apron is clean. The uniform fits the same way it always has, but it no longer disappears into the background. Eyes follow her, then look away. Some linger. Some don't bother hiding it. At the bar, the bartender sets a glass of water in front of her without asking. He hesitates, then nods once, as if confirming something to himself. She takes a sip. The water tastes flat. The manager keeps a respectful distance now. When he speaks, it's quieter, not because he's afraid of being heard, but because he's learned the room listens differently. He gestures instead of touching. He waits for her acknowledgement before moving on. Outside, traffic on East 58th Street slides past the windows in a steady stream. Headlights smear across the glass and vanish. A delivery truck idles too long at the curb before pulling away. Hana steps into the service corridor. The walls feel the same. The floorboards still complain in the same places. The office door stands open. Inside, the desk lamp hums. The chair is pushed back, the jacket gone. The wine stain is no longer visible, scrubbed from fabric and floor alike. She pauses in the doorway. For a moment, she sees it as it was, the stillness, the closed door, the phone vibrating against wood. The compression of it sits in her chest, familiar, contained. She steps inside anyway. Her phone rests on the desk. It lights once, then again. She doesn't pick it up. The glow fades. The room returns to its dim, functional quiet. Back on the floor, a junior server approaches her, stops, then speaks with care. A question about a table. A small decision. Hana answers without raising her voice. The server nods and moves off, quicker now, steadier. A couple near the window finishes dessert and asks for the check. Hana brings it. They thank her directly, not as habit, but as acknowledgement. It lands without ceremony. Near closing, the manager locks the front door and turns the sign. The click echoes softly. Staff begin their routines, stacking chairs, wiping surfaces, counting drawers. The motions look the same as they always have. The weight beneath them has shifted. Hana walks the room once more. She straightens a chair that doesn't need it. She aligns a menu. The work grounds her. It always has. At the center table, she stops. The place where the glass tipped, where wine-darkened fabric and floor, has been restored. No mark remains. She stands there for a beat longer than necessary, hands resting lightly on the chair back. The opening returns to her, not as heat, not as shock, but as clarity. The stillness. The choice to remain. The cost already paid before anyone else noticed. She releases the chair and turns away. Outside, the city keeps moving. Somewhere beyond the block, phones light up. Names travel. Interest spreads. None of it is loud yet. None of it needs to be. Hana steps back behind the bar and dries her hands on a clean towel. The fabric is cool, crisp. She folds it once and sets it down with care. The room settles into silence. Blasian stands intact. And visible.